But first, at one level, a business refusing to supply a jumping castle to a Jewish school is just showy, low-rent, lefty virtue signalling. But at another level, it's a sign of the rampant anti-Semitism that the Gaza war has triggered and of the double standards and the one-sidedness of our vast anti-racism bureaucracy. Just think of the reaction should a pub refuse service to Aboriginal people, or a venue refuse to host a same-sex wedding reception. Now, so far, there's not been a peep from the Human Rights Commission or any of the other many bodies that are set up to ensure that people aren't discriminated against on the basis of race or religion. Just as none of these entities have been vocal in their denunciation of the race hate so evident in the Gas the Jews rally in support of Hamas out the front of the Opera House, or the numerous anti-Israel marches that have so disfigured our big cities these past 4 weeks. Here's the Human Rights Commission website where it clearly states, and I quote, "It's against the law for a provider of goods and services to discriminate against a person by refusing to provide goods and services or facilities because of his or her race." But that's exactly what a Western Sydney business has done, posting on its Instagram page a response to the Jewish school's request for a quote. "There's no way," says the business operator, "I'm taking a Zionist booking." Adding on social media, "I don't want your blood money, free Palestine." Now, good on the New South Wales Premier, Labor's Chris Minns, for calling this outrageous and for asking for it to be investigated. But somehow I doubt our politically correct thought police are going to spend much time coming down now on anti-Semitism when they haven't before. I'm dealing with this tomorrow in my column for The Australian, but there's a shocking double standard now in evidence, not just from the pro-Hamas, anti-Israel protesters trying to intimidate Australian Jews near a Melbourne synagogue last week, or by gunning their motorbikes en masse through a largely Jewish part of Sydney. Not just the double standards either, from Islamist hate preachers celebrating the Hamas atrocities, but denouncing Israel's measured and proportionate military response. But also the clear double standards from the government ministers who imply moral equivalence by calling out a next-to-non-existent Islamophobia wherever they can't avoid calling out anti-Semitism, so obviously on display in the wake of the Hamas butchery. Opposition leader Peter Dutton was quite right to call on the Prime Minister today for an urgent National Cabinet meeting to deal with the race hate that's now teetering on the brink of civil unrest.
I've written to the Prime Minister and will release that letter shortly, which calls on the Prime Minister to convene a National Cabinet to speak to the Premiers and to the Chief Ministers about what the joined-up response should be, because I fear that there will be a significant act within our country that will cause harm.
A little later today, though, in question time, Peter Dutton gave what I regard as his best speech to date as leader when he took the Prime Minister to task over his lack of spine on anti-Semitism, as well as the left's catastrophic failure to protect Australians from the 83 convicted foreign criminals it's just released into our community.
And this Prime Minister had a solemn duty, Mr Speaker, to stand up and to make sure that his government spoke with one voice. But did they do that? No. And what the Australian public has seen, and what has shocked the Jewish community in recent weeks since the 7th of October, is that this government is speaking out of both sides of its mouth. Let's call it out for what it is. This Prime Minister needs to stand up and to be united with the Jewish community. Now, what compounds it, Mr Speaker, is the fact that in the last 48 hours we learned that the hapless Minister for Immigration has taken a decision to release 83 hardened criminals, rapists, pedophiles, murderers, the rest of the detail he won't disclose, release those 83 people to live at large in the community. Did the Prime Minister pull him into line? Not a chance, Mr Speaker. Not a chance, because this Prime Minister is as weak as water, and the Australian public are working out what a fake and a fraud he and his government have turned out to be.
If the Australian Human Rights Commission can come down hard on journalists, even cartoonists, who they say offend Aboriginal people, why not on a business that refuses to serve Jews? And why not on everyone who's currently promoting a new Holocaust by demanding the destruction of Israel? If state police can disperse anti-lockdown marches with tear gas and rubber bullets, as we saw in Victoria, why do they do nothing to disperse the anti-Jewish marches happening now weekend after weekend? Unfortunately, there's really only one explanation, and that is that Labor has been taken over by the radical green left, that it's no longer the party of principled leaders like Bob Hawke. How else can you explain the reluctance of Labor MPs and union supporters to see a moral and legal difference between pro-Palestinian types barracking for a terror group and all Australians, Jewish and non-Jewish Australians, who support Israel's fight for national survival? It was Hawke, let's not forget, who said, if the bell tolls for Israel, it won't just toll for Israel, it will toll for all mankind. Now, they were prescient words for sure, but also just another sign of how far modern Labor has fallen.